welcome back to another session where we're going to recreate those water cooler conversations that you've had with your colleagues and peers. And we're going to do it in a relaxed and informal way. And I've also got three fantastic panelists. So we're going to bring the topic of powering transformation with integrated communications to life. And we're going to do all that through real-world experiences, stories, and getting them to share their insights and lessons learned, and also how they've turned challenges into opportunities. But before we do that, I just want to extend the invitation over to you because we want to hear your stories and your experiences too. So subscribe to our YouTube channel, CIO Watercooler, and also check out the CIO Watercooler website. There's so much content on there, and let us know what you'd like to see more of. But enough from me. Let's get today's panelists onto today's episode. So today we're going to be talking about powering transformation with integrated communications, and I have three great panelists to join me in demystifying the topic. So to begin with, Kelvin, can you tell everyone watching a little about who you are and what you do?
I'm Kelvin Prescott. I'm Director for Pre-Sales and Business Development for Virgin Media O2. And just a bit about background, I spent about 20 or so years in professional services myself, firstly working for a management consultancy and then setting up and running my own consultancy firm. And then I moved into what was O2 to focus on telecoms transformation, how the digital transformation could be enabled for businesses across the UK. So I've got a bit of vested interest as a poacher come turned gamekeeper on this particular topic.
Fantastic. Thank you, Calvin. And we also have James Grice. Could you introduce yourself too, James?
Hi, Neil. Yeah, I'm James Grice. I am Head of Legal Service Design at Evershed Sutherland LLP. I've been in IT now since 2006, held a number of roles in that time, all of which on reflection have been about end user experience, whether that's right back in the early days of the service desk through to the sort of change and transformation roles that I hold now. But I've always had a passion for designing services and supporting users and getting the best experience from technology.
Excellent. Thank you, James. And finally, last but by no means least, Ian, could you introduce yourself to everyone?
I'm Ian Penny. I'm the Group CIO at Hiscox, the specialist insurers. I've worked across technology for more years than I care to mention, mostly in financial services, so investment banking, retail banking. But I started my career as a British government research scientist, so I still have that sort of techie propeller head kind of mentality when the chips are down.
Now, the world has changed so much in the last 2 years. So, Kelvin, can I ask that you set the scene and share your insights around how you've seen change-resistant sectors phasing out analogue systems and migrating to some kind of digital unified communications platform? Because there's so many big changes out there. But what have you seen, Kelvin?
Well, what we've seen, I think, is two distinct phases occurring. Firstly, as organisations responded to the lockdowns and the changes and controls required by the pandemic, and then the slightly longer but nonetheless more interesting phase as they worked out what to do when the controls and freedom of movement started to come back. So at the front end of the pandemic, we clearly had lots of organizations who provided advice, professional services to customers, suddenly having to pivot like a handbrake turn to working entirely remotely and dealing with all of the regulatory compliance and kind of information security risk that they would normally deal with by having on-premise IT and systems in an office to how do I do that when people are at home. So we saw massive change, like volumes sort of 3, 4, 5 times the increase in volume of obviously Zoom as we are on here and other types of collaborative technology, and companies accepting the risk of having staff working in different environments even though they would be offering regulatory advice. So we saw banks, financial institutions, insurance companies, law firms, all suddenly having to accelerate that change process. Now that compressed probably 3 or 4 years of digital transformation into about 3 or 4 months in the front end of the pandemic. What we're now seeing, though, is companies are trying to make the difficult choice of saying, well, do we revert? Do we revert back to the practices and the systems and controls we're familiar with? Or do we adapt? That's to say, we just accept the way we responded as being the right default from the pandemic, or do we transform? Do we kind of radically rethink the way in which we use technology to collaborate with customers? And I think in the professional services field in particular, they're having to do that against the backdrop of customers themselves who've got radically different expectations now about how they interact with customers. And to take just one example, we work with a large retail bank, an insurance company that suddenly had to pivot to having 400 staff who would be in one of 2 or 3 contact centers to having all of their staff operating remotely during the pandemic. And now they're going through the process of working out how do they capture the benefits of having staff able to work flexibly and deal with customers in a number of different ways, whilst at the same time retaining compliance and also critically getting that intimacy and engagement with the customers that is often only available from a face-to-face interaction.
And that's one of the reasons I was so excited to get James and Ian on here, obviously representing the legal and the insurance industry. So Ian, to begin with, can you share how you might have replaced paper-based systems and attempted to modernise your operations to ultimately meet the expectations of your customers?
Absolutely. And I think there's, as Kelvin said, to start with, we entered the pandemic and we went from, a small number of offices to, in essence, opening about 3,000 offices overnight when everybody, went and worked from home. Big change. And that's now accelerated into how do we embrace hybrid working? And there's both the return to office or this hybrid working scheme, but also then there's the competition that exists for talent right now, the real war for talent. And collaboration tools are part of the employee proposition. So a modern digital workplace is part and parcel of the environment that we aspire to give colleagues when they come into the firm. And it's actually a differentiating factor. It can be the difference between hiring an individual or not hiring an individual is the type of work they're doing, how they're going to be doing it, and the tools, importantly, they're going to be doing it with. In the insurance industry, we've obviously our Lloyd's organization, everyone is used to just walking into the Lloyd's building and doing business on the trading floor in Lloyd's, and suddenly that's no longer there. So electronic signatures, scanning of documents, moving things around much more easily became part and parcel of that. But the collaborative nature of the discussion needed to continue. And initially, that was, the Zooms and WebExes and that sort of stuff. But right now we're looking to do that in a much more cohesive way, bringing in many things that used to be done in a separate system. Everything from simply, take a simple example. I have to go to a Workday to book my holiday. I don't need to do that anymore. I can go into Teams. I go into the Workday channel. I can do that. The approver for that, if one of my guys does that, that arrives in my Teams environment. I hit approve. It's done. I don't need to log into separate environments and do that. If I'm chatting with one of my guys and just messaging backwards and forwards, we can take that in a phone call. We can take that into a video. We can add participants to that video. We can share documents and such, all within one unified environment. And that's incredibly powerful. And we're all now, I think, all end user organizations are starting to embrace this to some extent or another. But the next evolution is how do I enable the same fluency, the same seamless interaction between ourselves and our business partners? And that's, I think, where you'll start to see an overlay around the security aspects of it, the regulatory aspects of it. Where does confidential information, where are the borders of the organization and such, but radical change occurring.
And James, I'd love to bring you in on this, because when people think of the legal industry, they probably think of one of two things. There will be tens of thousands of documents in paper format. And also the legal industry has traditionally been accused of being a little bit slow to adopt technological change. So have you been on a similar journey with replacing paper-based systems, etc.?
Yeah, Neil, and you're quite right. I'm slightly envious of some of the things that Ian's described there. They're a little bit further forward than we are, but yeah, very much so. As you say, traditionally a little behind the curve when it comes to technology. We had, like both of you described, radical transformation at the start of COVID. Like you said, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years worth of digital transformation in weeks. We saw platforms like DocuSign go from tens of envelopes a month to suddenly thousands of envelopes a month, and that curve has continued to increase. we launched a mobile app called Open House, which was an attempt to recognise the isolation that a lot of our colleagues were now suffering from, and to try and connect them and get them to collaborate in ways that they previously wouldn't have done. I know mobile apps aren't exactly the most cutting edge when it comes to technology, but for us that was quite a big move and something that really did help our teams to get through those first few months of COVID. We saw a lot of impact on a number of different areas. As you mentioned, document management is a big deal for law firms. And we were just in the middle of just about to kick off a migration to cloud-based document management, which was a much-needed upgrade. We've now finally concluded that, and it's bringing huge value to our lawyers, and it's really enabling this remote working world that we're living in. But that was, right at the wrong time, really. COVID came for us. Conversely to that, we actually had just finished rolling out a number of laptops to replace traditional desktop devices, which couldn't have been better timed, because as we went into lockdown, of course, all of our lawyers were already enabled with the hardware that they needed to make that move. So it could have been a much more difficult period for us had that not been the case. But yeah, I think as it, looking at the return to office now, and that what is the right blend, as Ian said, that war for talent is causing huge problems in legal. Huge challenges around getting people in to the firm, selling them on the benefits of working for Eversheds over any other global law firm. And also, I think the cat's out the bag, isn't it? We all got used to being able to work remotely. Our lawyers who perhaps for a long time believed that they'd never be able to work in a fully digital world, that paper was a necessary evil for them, suddenly realised that wasn't the case. And suddenly they're at home operating normally, not commuting multiple hours into the workplace, seeing their family. And for many, hopefully that was a good thing. Perhaps some others were keen to get back. But for the most part now, our challenge is, how do we find that right balance? How do we bring people back? And what is the right balance? Is it a couple of days a week? Is it full time? We've currently gone for a sort of hybrid model. We believe that gives us the best of both worlds, because not everything can be replaced by digital as much as we would like to. That face-to-face is so important, especially in the legal world. And you're talking about training new lawyers and junior lawyers coming through the organization. It's really hard to give them the benefits of our senior lawyers and our partners when they can't be in the office to overhear that client conversation and hear how the partner handles themselves. So there's some areas we still haven't quite got right from a tech perspective that we'd like to be able to address, that do require face-to-face. But overall, I think we've seen huge change, and generally it's been well adopted.
It's a great point you made about hybrid working there. I spoke to a few companies recently where they insist on one day of the week that everyone in the business must be in, so everyone can catch up on those conversations and water cooler moments, dare I say. But Kelvin, a lot of people are going to be turning to you for solutions and unified communications, etc. But so you've got to lead by example in a certain way. So how has this helped you all foster a culture of collaborative teamwork and improve the change that your customers are looking for?
Well, I think there's probably 3 or 4 areas that are worth exploring. The first is obviously, if you're going to work in a hybrid way, then you need the connectivity and you need the facilities and services that allow that to be possible. Obviously, James mentioned about having the necessary, whether it's laptops or mobile devices and connectivity and broadband and all those things, and they're the essential plumbing that you have to have in place at the right speed and performance, so that you can have a near real-time experience when you're dealing with other people. But I think when we've been working with our customers, and also when we've been taking the same medicine ourselves, what we're also discovering is that there's some really important cultural rituals that the organization has to adopt in order to get the balance right between structured and unstructured work. There's a real shift of focus in terms of why we come together, to be as much about meaning as it is about agenda. And then there's a final piece, which is about having the right tools on top of that infrastructure that allow you to collaborate. So rather than push a particular piece of technology from that, I just want to talk a little bit about this piece about culture and rituals. Because we talk about hybrid reporting. Do you have a rule about 1 day a week in the office? Or do you have a rule that says you must, it's particular teams have to come together for only these purposes? Is it about how, your junior staff, who obviously will often benefit more from being together than your more senior staff, how do you manage that? And how do you manage it so that it's respectful of about family, parental kind of caring commitments that go? So first thing we certainly learned is that if you don't have those rituals, you don't get the benefit of organic learning and sharing. And we've certainly seen that with our customers, to James's point. I think the other part of it, though, is being clear that most of the value from face-to-face time comes from from not having a specific agenda, or where the purpose of that time is primarily about relationship building, celebration of accomplishments, or unstructured exploration of ideas. Because there's almost nothing that you could write an agenda for that you can't do remotely, even this conversation being a great example. Yeah. So when you think about what the value is that people get from hybrid working, it's mostly the ability to come and form a relationship with their colleagues and their co-workers, explore ideas that aren't properly formed, or even just kind of celebrate achievement or share stories about what we might do in the future. So those are the areas we see a lot of value. And then we see the same thing into our suppliers, our partners, our customers, their supply chain. They don't really want us to have a face-to-face meeting just for the sake of it if they could do it remotely. And I'm sure that the same is true within the legal, the insurance firms as well. But the collaboration tools, you need to have the things that allow you to whiteboard, to share documents securely, to be able to kind of create iteratively in real time, and then to manage projects and collaborative work over a period of time, so that everybody can see what's happening, what the latest status of different initiatives and tasks is. So I'd to call into those 4 areas, but the most interesting bit is how you respond culturally, how you establish the right reasons why you come together versus the reasons why you want to work remotely.
And Ian, to bring you in on this, is there anything you can share about the journey you've been on and fostering that culture of collaborative teamwork and improved change?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what we did initially is, I guess, what a lot of firms did, which was say, okay, well, we think people should be in the office, 3 days a week or 3 days every other week or something like that. And we quite rapidly came to the conclusion that actually that's the wrong way to go about this. We didn't used to tell people you can go and work from home today because you've got work that can be done at home. They used to do that. We used to trust them and empower them to do that. In the same way as Kelvin mentioned, the cultural rituals of the firm are such that the office is somewhere where you come to reconnect with your colleagues, reconnect with brokers, with business partners, claims handlers, things like that. Reconnect with the team. So it's a place where the culture and where face-to-face collaboration is the order of the day. And therefore, we've moved to a different environment where we're empowering each team to come up, in essence, with a team charter. What activities need to be done in the office? What rituals, to use Kelvin's term, need to be done in the office versus what rituals, what work can be done remotely from home. And the technology supports the unified platforms that, Teams environments such that we have here and such is being built out in order to support those underpinnings. So it's technology enabling that hybrid workplace, enabling the refinement of the firm's culture and our interaction with customers, rather than here's a tool. And I think that has been a great, switch, a tilt that we've been able to affect within the firm, because people now buy into it. When you're giving people incredibly technical tools that have massive, very powerful capability, one of the things not to ignore is you need to give them the confidence to use those tools as well. So there's a large piece in here is not only about rolling out the technology, but it's actually teaching people how to use them, what the different components mean, taking them through that journey of change from how they used to work to how they're going to work in the future, how we want them to work in the future. And that's a two-way street. A great example here is as we started to roll out our new digital workplace environment, we said we need some digital champions in the organization, regular colleagues, regular employees who will just put through some more training and such, and they will evangelize. We opened that up it was actually a Friday lunchtime for we wanted about 80 to 100 of them. We got more than 200 in the first 2 or 3 hours, and then looked at, okay, how do we expand the program? There's massive pent up demand for I want to understand how to use these tools and such. So I wouldn't underestimate not just the technical aspects of this, but the cultural change that you need to bring about, and the fact that you will have people different abilities in the organization, people who will pick up the tools, use them, understand how to use them really quickly, really simply, and other people who have been working in a specific way for a long period of time and may be a little bit afraid of the change, afraid of the way of doing things. And you need to enable them and give them that confidence such they can utilize the power of the tools that they're being given, and have the confidence to do that correctly. But to Kelvin's point, there are still things that you need to come to the office for. Mm-hmm. When we've got new people joining the firm, actually that face-to-face interaction to begin with, that gelling with the team, creating those social bonds with your teammates, is really important. And it's much harder to do that. It's not impossible, because we had to do it over the pandemic period, but it's much harder to do that remotely. And therefore, many of our team charters include in it that the team will spend a few days in the office whenever a new person starts. That's just a concrete but small example of the type of activity that occurs in the office rather than remotely.
So many great points there, Ian. I think something else I'd love to bring up here as well is many businesses and many different industries have the luxury of using things like Slack, so many other different cloud-based solutions and shadow IT products that are available on the market that we all use in our personal life. But of course, James, in the legal industry, you don't have that luxury because you're dealing with highly confidential information, and that information must be secured at all times, and you must own that data at all times too. So I'm curious, how did you address security concerns, and how did that improve the handling and security of sensitive data?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and you're spot on. We are a little bit limited in terms of the tools and that we're allowed to adopt and utilize, and we're heavily scrutinized by some of our clients who are themselves heavily regulated. So we often get not only the regulations that are applicable to us in legal, but then all of that of our clients as well is sort of pressed upon us, as well as sometimes the demands to use particular types of tech that they want us to use. We've got certain clients who, so we have got some examples of where Slack is utilized in the organization, but at the client's request and as part of a communication platform that we use directly with them and nowhere else. And we have to be, that's heavily governed. We invested heavily, to be honest, in the last couple of years with both our security team as well as our data and analytics team, and of course our sort of governance and compliance team is already significantly well resourced in terms of our organization, and we work very closely with them on all areas of technology. My team is all about innovation and collaboration, so I find it particularly challenging, and those aren't always my favorite teams, and they would probably not surprised to hear me say that, but I understand the benefits that they bring and the value and the reason for them. So we work very closely together to ensure everything we do meets the very strict demands that are put upon us. I do want to just give a very quick example, actually, to Ian's point previously about collaboration platforms and tools and technologies, and completely agree with everything you've said around the benefits of in-person. We actually found, although we lost some of the benefits of face-to-face through the pandemic, we also, by force, I think, stumbled upon the benefits of some of this collaborative technology and what that has allowed us to do as a team who's sort of challenged to drive innovation. We actually had to pivot very quickly at the beginning of 2020, having geared ourselves up to start rolling out design thinking across our organization. We'd been really getting into it the previous year, run a load of sort of trials and in-house workshops to get ourselves to a point where we had the confidence to facilitate and guide our teams and our clients through these sort of design thinking workshops, only to be hit at the start of 2020, just as we were about to go out with our in-person sessions and all of our templates and our sticky notes and all that good stuff, with obviously that in-person ban. We could no longer see people face to face. We couldn't put 20 or 30 people in a room. And we had to look for other ways to do it. Unsurprisingly, Zoom was a platform that we leaned on. We also looked at the whiteboarding solutions that Ian touched on, and we settled on Miro. There are others available, of course. We settled on Miro. But actually, those two technologies became the cornerstone for a huge event that we ran in 2021, which we called Techtober. But it was a technology initiative global conference and hackathon designed to promote the use of legal technology across all of our lawyers and across to benefit all of our clients. And actually, had we been in a position perhaps pre-pandemic, that kind of event would likely have been run in person. We had a previous actually in 2019 where we were really bad at naming things. It was called Techtember, and it happened in September. But that was a face-to-face event. Huge cost, lots of time, investment, and travel involved in delivering that. And even with all of that effort, we missed a huge proportion of our user base. Wind forward to 2021, we've gone through the pandemic, and we're looking to run something similar again. This time, because we're going to run this virtually, this is a totally global event, run across 4 days. We invited key clients. There's very little effort for them to join other than an hour in their diary, because they don't have to travel. It was simply log on, dial into your Zoom call. And we ran this 4-day conference followed by a global hackathon to sort of circa 300 members of our teams who all use the Miro tools and collaborative platforms to use our now digitized design thinking toolkit to run them through this collaborative activity. And we actually got a huge amount of positive feedback, and we saw a huge amount of success from that event. So I think one of the things that we realized was that although we lost that benefit of face-to-face, and a design thinking workshop or any kind of workshop still runs best face-to-face, I still firmly believe that, as much as I want to embrace the tech. You don't lose that much. And actually what you gain, or what we gained at least, was much more diversity, much more involvement and inclusion of our workforce. And because we could bring people together from all over the globe, we got really diverse thoughts and ideas and perspectives, which ultimately meant that our concepts and ideas were better thought through. They had more, more viewpoints imposed upon them. And I think that for us outweighed the loss that we'd had with the face-to-face element. So I just wanted to share that because I think for me, that was one of the biggest takeaways from the pandemic, and the biggest challenges that I faced was trying to pivot to deliver in that way.
And Ian, I suspect that you've been on a very similar journey, very similar challenges as well. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, absolutely. I mean, just to reinforce what James says, I mean, the technology enablement, especially for those sort of meetings, and also for sort of town hall, we call them box meetings in the sort of London insurance community, where it used to be, I would stand up in front of a room full of people in London. There'd be a video link to another room in Atlanta and another one in Lisbon and another one in York, et cetera, et cetera. And the people that were remote to that got a second class experience compared to the people locally. Yeah. And what we've committed to is that actually we're just going to do everything now virtually for those sort of town hall. And everybody is now on a level playing field, so we can have, 600 people dialed in, go through the question and answer, because we're using the technology, the Q&A pages and things. People can submit questions as we go along. We use Klaxoon, for example, to bring up, word boards and things like that. And we're asking for ideas, and we can do surveys and such. And it's changed the way in which do we do those sort of meetings. And to James's point, it's created a much more inclusive environment globally for the organization, because it's no longer proximity to, our headquarters building in London. It's much more about a level playing field for everybody, and that has been an astonishing sort of finding, so to speak. And as James says, as much as I love the technology, and we've got we're progressing with a massive rollout for a completely new digital workplace. Sometimes you just need to meet people face to face, and but actually not being prescriptive about that and allowing people to empowering the team to make that decision themselves about when they want to do that. I think that is absolutely key to this, because as everybody's adopting agile, I'm sure autonomous teams, self-guiding, that come together when they need to and such. That's an underpinning of that. So flow efficiency, to get it into the environment, is just allow the teams to operate how they need to operate, and they're the ones that know how to do that. I cannot tell each of my teams in the organization the most optimal way to work. They know how to do that. My role in many respects is to enable that, not only for my own teams, but all the other teams within Hiscox, and then the partner interactions and giving people the tools that they need in order to win at that customer interaction.
So many great points and food for thought there. And Calvin, to bring us home on the topic of powering transformation with integrated communications, meeting expectations while understanding the nuances of hybrid working and securing data, what food for thought would you leave everyone with today?
I think firstly, thank you. Really fascinating listening to the kind of some of the stories and the examples there. I take away from it a few things. The first is that the issues about security, compliance, and trust in professional services are real, but it turns out they're perfectly solvable in that remote and hybrid working environment. Second is the impact and the power of culture and understanding the real value of face-to-face engagement versus remote is critical if you're going to get the benefits. And the third, and I think Ian expressed it really beautifully, is being able to give the teams the empowerment and trust, as well as the tools and the training, to be able to use the technology to actually deliver a brilliant experience for their customers. I think you get those three things right, along, of course, with infrastructure and connectivity and platform that allows it, then there's a real opportunity for us all to have better relationships with our customers, as well as happier, more engaged people working in our teams.
100% with you on that. And I cannot thank you all enough for coming on here, not just for talking about the powering transformation with integrated communications, but also bringing the whole topic to life with your very real world stories. And I suspect your words will resonate with people listening and watching all over the world. But more than anything, just a big thank you, Ian, James and Calvin, for sharing your insights today.
Yep, thank you.
Cheers.
As I said at the very beginning of today's episode, we want to make you part of this conversation too. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. And also, please, check out the CIO Water Cooler website and let us know your thoughts on what you'd like to see more of. But more than anything, I hope you'll join us again next time on CIO Water Cooler.